even people who don't like tech billionaires like me, I think a lot of people believe that tech billionaires know what they're talking about when it comes to science and technology and the future of science and technology. And the reality is that they don't. They have no idea what they're talking about. Kurzweil says it's completely inevitable that this will lead to AI with godlike powers of creation and destruction and transformation. And these futures promise endless growth and transcendence of all possible limits. It's an incredibly seductive ideology. Musk certainly has moved the goalposts. He said, we're gonna get to the next Mars launch window. We're gonna go at this time. We're gonna go at this time. He has said over and over and over again, he's gonna put 1 million people on Mars by 2050. So there is basically no catastrophe that could happen here on Earth that would make Earth less habitable than Mars, because Mars sucks. Mars is terrible.
So Adam Becker, thanks for joining us. I was interested in your book because our newspaper, Byline Times, has been exploring sort of how this small circle of Silicon Valley oligarchs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, Altman, Thiel, and others, have sought to remake society in their own image. So we just did a whole edition with a lot of pieces around Facebook. I interviewed Cory Doctorow, and just thinking about this incredible degree of sort of both economic and political power that they have. Yeah. And then, of course, after the election of Donald Trump, you see that supercharged, right? They're literally surrounding him as inauguration.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm very grateful to have you here. I was hoping, obviously, your book came out before the election, but I was curious as to what inspired you to write it in the first place, and sort of what do you make of how much more powerful that culture's become in the wake of that fateful election.
Absolutely, yeah, and thanks for having me here. And apologies in advance; I'm a little under the weather today, but yeah, I mean the book. So technically, the book came out after the election, but I finished writing it and turned it in and everything before the election. And I mean, honestly, what prompted me to write it is a lot of the same stuff that you were just talking about. Those trends were already there, right? Years ago when I started working on the book, like 5 years ago, ish. I live here in the Bay Area, and I've lived here for quite some time now. And one of the things I realized living here was, I think most people believe that tech billionaires, even people who don't like tech billionaires like me, I think a lot of people believe that tech billionaires know what they're talking about when it comes to science and technology and the future of science and technology. And the reality is that they don't. They have no idea what they're talking about. And these ideas that they have about the future of science and technology bear no relationship to reality, have no justification in science or in, the study of technology. And there's plenty of reasons to think that they are wrong and very few reasons to think that they're right.
And obviously there's the factual part is important, but then there's also just the kind of absurdity of it as well. I was hoping you'd start, you introduced the book sort of with Sam Bankman-Fried and this story about his connections to effective altruism.
Yeah.
I'd appreciate, can you, for people who don't know, I think he's got a fair amount of notoriety.
Yeah.
But for people who don't know, could you talk about Sam Bankman-Fried and the effective altruism movement?
Yeah, absolutely. So the basic idea there is, Sam Bankman-Fried, well, actually, let me back up and talk about effective altruism first. It's easier to explain Sam Bankman-Fried in light of the effective altruism movement. So effective altruism is one of these ideas that sounds pretty good on the surface. And but when you start actually, digging into it, you realize that there's a problem. The devil's in the details. So the idea, put simply, is just to do the most good, the most effectively in the world. And that sounds fine, but what do we mean by the most good? What do we mean by effectively? Um, and it turns out that for effective altruists, the answers to these questions often involve, oh, let's go check out various nonprofit organizations and figure out which ones are the most cost effective at saving lives, and then donate as much money as possible toward those things. And then they take that idea, which already has its problems, right? There are problems with that idea, like there are important problems in the world that you can't solve that way.
Right.
Um, and like systemic change can't be affected by donating a lot of money to nonprofits. And they also they take that idea and run with it, and they run with it in several different ways. One way they run with it is they say, oh, well, what you should do if you want to make the biggest change you can in the world is find a job that lets you make the most money that you can, and then donate that money to worthy causes. And then another way that they take that idea and run with it is they say, okay, yeah, I guess there are some causes that that you can't just solve by donating to nonprofits that save lives. The causes that matter the most to us, the effective altruists, are the causes that would prevent the extinction of humanity, because to the effective altruists, with their sort of utilitarian way of looking at the world, they are concerned that that like the future will not have as many people as it could have. Right. And the more people you have, the better that future is. And so they want to have a big future, what they call a big future. And to them, this creates what one of the leading effective altruists, a guy named Will McCaskill, called a moral case for space settlement. And there are problems with that, like space settlement's not going to happen. But yeah, so like they want to settle space and they want to stop existential threats to humanity. And the second part of that sounds good. It's good to try to stop something that would be an existential threat to humanity, like, say, climate change or nuclear war. But again, the devil's in the details. The effective altruists believe that the threat to humanity from a super intelligent AI that doesn't exist yet and nobody knows how to build, that the threat from such an AI wiping us all out on its way to, universal domination is significantly greater than the threats from climate change and nuclear war combined,
Right.
based on almost nothing at all. Sam Bankman-Fried, was, I guess, about 10, 15 years ago, a student at MIT, and he actually met Will McCaskill and learned about these ideas, effective altruism, and decided to take that and run with it, and made the most money that he could. And the way that he did that was at first, trading on Wall Street, and then building a cryptocurrency empire, and making billions and billions of dollars, and then committing massive fraud and essentially, turning his cryptocurrency trading platform and the hedge fund associated with it into a kind of, fraudulent pyramid-like scheme, and all the while donating enormous amounts of money, both for political influence here in the U.S. and elsewhere, and toward the charitable causes that he and other effective altruists deemed the most important, mostly having to do with, preventing an AI apocalypse. Right.
Well, that's what's so interesting about that focus on the AI apocalypse, and I think about this with Sam Altman in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Is these are also the people who are making the large language models and the when we talk about AI now, all the products that we associate with that, they're simultaneously saying it could take over the world, but also invest and let us be the ones to safeguard it.
Yeah.
So I was hoping you'd get into that, because there are these different visions sort of for how AI could go apocalyptically wrong.
Yeah.
you talk about sort of the Ray Kurzweil, the more positive sort of singularity
Hmm.
idea, but then there's also the Yudkowsky's, sort of apocalyptic premonitions
Yeah.
of all these things that could go wrong. So, can you talk about the positive and the negative singularity, and then also what unites them, and what's at the core of that belief?
Ray Kurzweil is one of the advocates, probably the most prominent advocate or popularizer of an old idea called the singularity. And the idea there is that there's this trend in technology to improve itself but the most obvious sort of present form of that is Moore's law, the exponential trend in fitting more and more transistors on microchips, and thus the increase in microprocessor speed over the last 50 years. And so Kurzweil says that's part of a more general trend, and that what's going to happen is all the technology is going to get better and better, faster and faster, and that AI will show up and be, like real AI, human level AI, and get better and better, faster and faster, improving itself, uh, you know, figuring out how to write and create a better AI, a smarter AI, which will then create an even smarter one, even faster, and so on and so forth, until in short order, not very long from now, a few years or maybe a decade and a half, uh, we will have a completely transformed society.
Right, and it's inevitable, right?
Yeah, Kurzweil says it's completely inevitable that this will lead to AI with godlike powers of creation and destruction and transformation,
Hmm.
and this will lead to all of us living our lives in exactly the way that we could, like the best possible lives we could possibly imagine, with everything in our lives changing however we want to our whim, with no visible difference between virtual reality and reality, and we can live as long as we want, and we can take over the universe, and we can upload our minds into a computer and live in this science fictional fantasy essentially forever. And Kurzweil, yeah, says this is inevitable. It's coming soon, and it's not stoppable. Uh, a claim that Sam Altman has also made,
Hmm.
and among others. I don't know what it is with these guys named Sam, but um, but yeah. So Kurzweil says that's coming, and it's going to be great. He says it's going to be fantastic. Everyone's going to be happier. Everybody's going to be, healthier. Everybody's going to be living essentially forever, and everyone's going to have a good time, and we'll have more of everything that we care about. Then there's Yudkowsky and the AI doomers, right? There's these two camps of people involved with these AI fantasies, roughly. I mean, more than two, but two broad camps. The people like Kurzweil, who say that this is going to be amazing, the boomers, and then the people like Yudkowsky, who say, yeah, those changes are coming and it's going to be a nightmare and we're all going to die, the doomers. And what Yudkowsky and others like him claim is that, yeah. Basically, all of that is correct, and that an AI is coming that will, improve itself and rapidly gain, more intelligence than all of humanity combined, and then it will have goals, whatever goals it started that process with, that were, unthinkingly programmed into it by humans, and those goals will not be compatible with the continued existence of humans. That
Right.
it will want to use the resources that we need to stay alive, like food and soil and plants and animals and the atoms in our own bodies, and turn them into other stuff.
Right.
And uh, and so Nick Bostrom, one of the influential people in the effective altruism movement, who's also influenced by Yudkowsky, and uh, he has this scenario, the paperclip machine, that an AI that was built by like a paperclip company, gains super intelligence, but still wants to just make paperclips. And so it turns the entire Earth into paper clips or more resources in order to turn more stuff into paper clips and thereby, kills everybody. This is all nonsense. I mean, it all sounds ridiculous. Um, that's not enough to dismiss it, unfortunately, because these ideas are extremely influential. And so we can't just say, oh, that sounds ridiculous and laugh it off. But it turns out if you dig in, no, there's no real substance there for
Mm.
either the boomers or the doomers. And what they have in common, they would say that their perspectives couldn't be farther apart. But they actually are two sides of the same coin because they have one extremely or a set of extremely important assumptions in common that this godlike AI is coming and that it's unstoppable. And the boomers say it's going to be amazing, and the doomers say it would be amazing if we could ensure that it would be safe. And so we
Mm.
have to find a way to get this AI's incentives aligned with our own. They call this the alignment problem. And so they say this is the single most important problem facing humanity today. The alignment problem is more important than global warming, nuclear war, great power war, like any income inequality or wealth inequality, all of the different problems facing us in the world today, all of them pale in comparison to the alignment problem because only the alignment problem is going to stop this otherwise inevitable extinction event. And there's no reason to believe any of that, and a lot of reason to believe it's false. It's just,
Right.
It's essentially a science fiction fantasy.
It's interesting. I guess it makes sense that it connects back to the tech industry in so many ways
Yeah.
because whether it's an apocalyptic AI or a good one, it always comes back to them
Yeah.
being the ones to either rein it in or benefit from it.
Oh,
Right?
totally. Yeah. I mean, like a lot of what's going on here is this desire to take all of the problems in the world and reduce them to problems of computer technology. And if you do that, that gets you a lot. It means that you don't have to worry about anything other than the stuff that Silicon Valley can do. And if you're a computer programmer or a software engineer or running a tech company, it means that the stuff that you need to spend all day thinking about and is in your financial interest to spend all day thinking about is the only stuff that really matters. And
Right.
these futures promise endless growth and transcendence of all possible limits. It's an incredibly seductive ideology.
It's interesting. I was talking to Cory Doctorow,
Yeah.
who was saying how, because I think you have the apocalyptic visions on one hand, and then, but before that, there's also these sort of lesser apocalyptic visions that you hear in the media all the time about AI.
Yep.
And I feel like they all kind of come downstream from this sort of thinking.
Yep.
But he was saying, like, I personally don't think a large language model could take most people's jobs.
No.
But if your boss thinks it could take your job, then it'll do it anyway.
Precisely. Yes.
And then you end up with huge infrastructural deficiencies
Yep.
in the long run, right?
Yep.
Really interesting. I just wanted to come to the last thing on AI.
Yeah.
Sam Altman had the idea that it would. I think it was Sam Altman who said that there's no point trying to like solve the climate crisis. We just need to make an AI that can do it for us.
Yeah.
Could you tell that story?
So Altman said something along those lines, and then Eric Schmidt also said almost those exact words as well, sometime in October. That's not in my book because my book was done by then. But yeah, this is, and there are other tech billionaires saying similar things, but like the two of them are sort of the most obvious people. But yeah, Schmidt just said that, that thing that you just said, essentially. He said there's no point in trying to meet our climate goals because it's not going to happen. So we should just use more energy, build an AI, and it'll solve climate change for us. Sam Altman got slightly more specific a couple years ago. He said, look, climate change is a really serious problem, but if you have a super intelligent AGI, which he said, AGI is coming in the next 4 years, like earlier this year, he said, if you have a system like that, then you can ask it, how do I build a lot of clean energy? How do I build a lot of efficient carbon capture? And how do I deploy these things into our infrastructure very quickly? And then you've solved climate change.
Mm.
And he, made it clear he thought that was a good plan for solving climate change. I don't think that's a good plan for solving climate change, because that plan is essentially build a machine that nobody knows how to build and that is ill-defined in the first place, and then ask it for three wishes. That is
Like a genie.
not how the world works. That is not a good plan. And the other thing that's striking about it is, like, primarily the problem with solving global warming, like the challenges that face us with climate change, are not primarily technological problems. We don't quite have all of the technology that we need. We need better carbon capture technology, but we have the clean energy technology pretty much to
Right.
solve it. And we could start making a real dent in it right now with the technology we have right now if we just deployed it widely. And the barriers to that are not technological. The barriers to that are primarily social and political. It's
Right.
not primarily a technological problem anymore.
Yeah,
And
that's a really important point. I
yeah,
want to come back to that, but I
yeah,
was hoping we could talk about space a little
yeah,
bit first.
yeah, absolutely, sure.
I found it interesting how Katy Perry, who went up in Jeff Bezos's I guess they just go into atmosphere for like 11 minutes and come back down.
Yeah, something like that.
Got a lot of flack for that.
Yeah,
But it seems like there's this broader effort from, you see it with Elon Musk as well, of sort of, he's been promising for years that he's going to be the one to, get us to Mars. And obviously, the goalposts always keep moving.
yeah,
And the promises aren't ever really delivered.
yeah.
But could you talk about that sort of escape fantasy of what, and maybe I just gave it away a little bit there, but
Sure, yeah, yeah, yeah. Look, Musk certainly has moved the goalposts. He said, we're gonna get to the next Mars launch window. We're gonna go at this time. We're gonna go at this time. But he has also been surprisingly consistent about, like, what this fantasy of Mars colonization that he claims he's going to accomplish is going to look like. He has said over and over and over again, he's going to put 1 million people on Mars by 2050 in a self-sufficient colony that will survive even if the rockets from Earth stop coming, as a backup for humanity in the event of some catastrophe here on Earth, like an asteroid strike. And this is roughly the worst idea I've ever heard. It is just about the stupidest thing that you could say, because there is basically no catastrophe that could happen here on Earth that would make Earth less habitable than Mars, because Mars sucks. Mars is terrible. The radiation levels are too high, the gravity's too low, there's no air, and the dirt is made of poison. It is an absolutely horrible place. And, I spend a lot of time in the book going into great detail about why Mars and any other destination in the solar system is awful. But, like, Musk says he's worried about asteroid strikes. More asteroids strike Mars than Earth. And, if an asteroid like the worst one that's ever hit Earth in the history of, animal life on Earth, the one that hit 66 million years ago, the one that killed off all the dinosaurs except for the birds, if another one like that hit, it would still be better here on Earth than it is on Mars.
wow.
And we know that, because even though that asteroid had all sorts of horrible effects, like worldwide, wildfires that burnt everything to a crisp, and I think it was like over 99% of all living beings dying, and like over 75% of all species going extinct, and right? Significant chunks of the surface of the Earth just incinerated as hot as, hotter than like broil on an oven, like something like that. Mammals survived. And we know that because we're here. If mammals had not survived that day, we would not be here. There are no mammals, then or now, that could survive unprotected from, without a spacesuit on the surface of Mars. And there were no spacesuits here on Earth 66 million years ago. There's nothing to breathe. If you were on the surface of Mars without a spacesuit, you would asphyxiate as the saliva on your tongue boiled off, because there's both no oxygen and the air pressure is so low, it's like less than 1% of the air pressure here on Earth at sea level, that the boiling point of water is below body temperature. It's really, really bad. Just to pick one last problem, 1 million people is not enough. Even if you somehow solved every other problem, like if you invented technology that probably can't exist and would be phenomenally dangerous if it did, to like make Mars more like Earth, which again, don't get me started on that. If you somehow did that and you put 1 million people on Mars, and then the rockets from Earth stopped coming, that wouldn't be enough, because you would need the kind of population base necessary to support a high-tech civilization that's completely independent from Earth. And you need more than 1 million people to do that, because there's just so many different jobs that need to be done. You need more like 500 million or maybe 1 billion people to do that. Those are the best guesses from leading economists to the answer to that question. And so that means that even if you did somehow get 1 million people on Mars, and then an asteroid like the one that killed off the dinosaurs hit Earth, and you had to pick whether to be on Earth or on that Mars colony, which one would give you the better chances of survival? The answer is Earth, because almost everyone on Earth would die. But the rockets from Earth would definitely stop coming, and then everyone on Mars would die.
Right.
It's a terrible plan. Yeah.
I've heard it compared to, like, Antarctica is not, we have a very hard time inhabiting that, right?
And
it's way better.
It's like, Antarctica's so much better. Antarctica has oxygen. Antarctica has, like water. There's the top of Everest is better, like way, 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 way better. If we wanted to get some location on the surface of Mars to be as hospitable as Antarctica in the polar night, like if we wanted to, transform Mars such that there were locations on the surface that were that hospitable to humanity, it would be the greatest undertaking in the history of human civilization, by many orders of magnitude. Like, it would take so much more than anything else that we've ever done, ever. Like, it would be harder than it would take more than all of the efforts that have ever been exerted on anything ever in the history of humanity combined, just to make Mars suck a little bit less. And for what? It's, if you did that and you made it as hospitable as Antarctica in the polar night, that's not a backup for humanity. You can't put 1 billion people into the middle of Antarctica. They would all die.
The for what question, I think, is interesting, because it's on the one hand, it seems like it's a lot of the good people at SpaceX, I'm sure, are aware of these limitations.
Yeah,
right?
I think so. Yeah.
So it's coming in a sort of top-down way.
Yep.
Do you think it's just another sort of science fiction obsession with Elon Musk, or is there something? Because it almost feels like there's something a little bit manifest destiny about it. Like,
oh yeah.
Humans deserve to inhabit the entire solar system and the entire universe, theoretically.
Yeah. I mean, Musk has been very clear about this. He's said over and over that that he thinks that there's a struggle going on between people who want humans to go extinct and people who want us to expand out into the universe, and that's just a false dichotomy. That's bullshit. That's not how this works. It's not like It's not like I or other people are saying, no, you're not going to put a million people on Mars because we want humanity to go extinct. It's that, trying to do that will not work
Right.
and is pointless anyway. Even if he could do it, it would not accomplish what he wants it to, or what he says he wants it to, which is to serve as a backup for humanity. But yeah, I think there is very much a manifest destiny thing here. I think that there's this idea of perpetual growth. Jeff Bezos is actually a really good example of this. Bezos is sort of more directly clear about it. He doesn't talk about space as like a lifeboat for humanity. He talks about space as a way of ensuring perpetual growth. He
Right.
says if we stay here on Earth, we're going to stagnate when we use up all the resources, so we have to go out into space. And that argument's pretty stupid for a lot of other reasons, like there are limited resources in space too, and growth would eventually have to end. And also, space is terrible. Like Mars, for all of the problems I was just outlining, Musk is right about one thing about Mars. It is the next most hospitable place in the solar system after Earth. The rest of the solar system's even worse. It's awful.
I had my money on Venus.
Yeah. Venus is. There's a spot in the clouds of Venus, about 60 miles up, where the temperature and the air pressure are fine. And so, if you're okay with never touching the ground and having no access to the ground because the surface of Venus is hot enough to melt lead, and has like atmospheric pressure similar to like being like thousands of feet under the ocean. But if you're cool with never going to the surface and just living in a balloon surrounded by sulfuric acid rain, or just clouds of sulfuric acid, really, it's not acid rain, it's just acid. Then yeah, sure, let's go for it. Let's do it. And that is the next most hospitable spot. Like the only good place in the solar system is Earth. And we're not leaving the solar system because you can't go faster than the speed of light.
I wanted to bring it to sort of to the bigger long-termist picture.
Yeah.
Because it feels like this idea of, it's similar to how they talk about AI, this space colonization being the most important thing. The most important thing we need to do is get off the planet because a meteor comes. When there's like a lot of slow-moving meteors already coming towards us, sort of already,
Sure.
as you say, political and social problems.
Yeah.
What can you talk a little bit about that broader vision? Because we talked about effective altruism, but long-termism sort of mutated out of that.
Yeah. So
mistaken.
long-termism is this idea that comes out of effective altruism that the most effective way that you can make the world a better place is to make sure that there are more future people with, happier lives. And the best way to do that is to make sure that humanity has access to the most resources possible. And so you take over the universe and seed it with people. And of course, there are a couple of problems with that. The first is that's not how ethics works. And the second is you can't do that. It's not physically possible. Or at least is wildly implausible. There's good reason to think that that's just not going to work. And in the effort to do it, you could cause all kinds of other problems, right? The technology that if you could build it to do that would be phenomenally destructive and would pose another one of these existential threats that they claim to care about. But they just don't seem to think about that. But yeah, long-termism is just another one of these bankrupt ideologies that comes from these people. It's hard to emphasize, or hard to really get your head around exactly how seriously these fairly ridiculous abstract ideas are being taken by some of the most powerful people in the world. And yet they are.
But it's the same kind of inevitability argument, right? Of it's guaranteed that we're all going to have our minds uploaded to the cloud. There's going to be 7 quintillion of us, and that means that that's the most important thing. It always comes back to, I think that's what unites a lot of this is inevitability. Their perceived inevitability.
Yeah, they see the future of technology as being something like, something out of a Civilization game, right? Like they see it as like a tech tree. And we're just sort of working our way through the tech tree. We're going to get to the next thing, which was already there and, didn't involve anything other than uncovering it. And that's not how the history of technology works. That's really not hardly how the history of almost anything works. Um, the history of technology is filled with contingency and human choice. But it's very convenient to say that it's inevitable because that gets you a few really important things. It means that you can just say these futures are the ones that are coming, and then there doesn't have to be a debate about what future we want because the future is inevitable. And it also means that no one can hold you, the leader of a tech company, accountable for what your company has done because all you did was reveal the inevitable future of technology. That's
Right.
not
No,
your fault.
I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
That's a really good segue to. I was going to ask you about Peter Thiel recently did an interview with the New York Times,
Yeah,
and
I
he sort
haven't
of
been able to stomach watching it yet. I know I have to,
it's
but it's a lot. Yeah.
I couldn't sit through the whole thing, but there was just a moment that sort of went viral, where he's kind of ranting about there's an Antichrist coming, and he literally uses the word Antichrist,
Yeah.
and he said basically they're gonna use the fears of technology to create a totalitarian one world government. And the interviewer, one of the few good questions he asked, he was like, "Isn't your military surveillance technology going to help create a
Yeah.
global totalitarian state?"
Yeah.
And he just does not have an answer for it.
Of course he doesn't. Yeah.
So it seems like, yeah, if you could talk about just sort of, they don't seem, a lot of these tech people just don't seem to understand what their own businesses are actually doing or where they fit into these broader fantasies about the world.
Look, they don't understand a lot of things. I think that, one of the, like, I started out talking about the myths of these tech billionaires understanding tech and science. And I think that there's also this broader myth that, if you're a billionaire, you you must be good at stuff and sort of generically smart because otherwise, how could you have become a billionaire? And the fact is that in a lot of ways, Silicon Valley and the whole market as a whole is kind of a casino. And saying that somebody must be smart because they're a billionaire is like saying that somebody must be smart because their slot machine won. That's not intelligence, that's luck.
I was bringing up to Sean earlier, just saying
Yeah.
remembering the metaverse
Yeah.
and how they had promised at the time that this was going to be this revolutionary, world-changing advent. You're going to have your digital car and your digital house, and this is
Yeah.
going to be your life. And no one bought it because
Nope.
it was stupid.
Yep.
But you can kind of see them testing in the waters on that, and now we're just on to the next thing, I guess, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like, there's a couple of reasons they wanted that, right? They wanted to mediate all human interaction through their technology so they could monetize it. But also, they did it because it sounded cool to them, right? I think that one of the mistakes that we can make when we're talking about these tech billionaires is we can say something like, oh, they only wanted to do the metaverse because it would allow them to monetize and capture every single human interaction. That is certainly true. They did want to capture and monetize every single human interaction, but that's not the only reason they did it. The other reason, or they wanted to do it, the other reason why Zuckerberg and these others wanted to do it is because they thought that that was the future of technology because they read it in science fiction. And you'll get a lot of people saying, oh, but that's just a convenient excuse for this thing that they wanted to do anyway. And I think when we say that, we tend to forget that something being in your financial interest makes it more likely that you genuinely believe it rather than less likely, right? I think that, yeah, there's definitely some cynicism and some, convenience here. But I also think that there's like genuine belief, which is, I think, more terrifying, that they actually think that they can do these things because it's very psychologically and politically convenient for them to believe that they can do those things and that these things are the future. And similarly, it's convenient for them to think of themselves as the smartest people. And they certainly buy into that myth. But the fact is that in a lot of ways, they're not particularly good at thinking, right? Anyone who's got any self-awareness, critical thought, critical self-awareness, would have anticipated that sort of question that Thiel was asked. about his own tech company, right? About Palantir.
Are you saying are you the Antichrist shouldn't really be like a gotcha question?
Right, exactly. And I mean, like, and it's also right there in the name of the freaking company, right? Like Palantir, right? This is yet another Peter Thiel company named after something from Lord of the Rings. And yeah, sure, the Palantiri, this is the kind of nerd I am. I know the proper pluralization of this fictional object are these seeing stones, right? From Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion. And what do? They let you see things far away, and so it makes some sense. But also they were corrupted by the Dark Lord Sauron and used as instruments to spread his evil around the world and corrupt like leaders of governments. So sure, let's name our company Palantir. What could possibly be bad about that? What could we be telegraphing about ourselves to the world by making that choice?
I want to stay on Thiel for a second and just say, I think you quoted him in the book, a very famous quote now of him saying, I think freedom and democracy are not compatible.
Yeah.
And that sort of leads me to thinking about Curtis Yarvin and Mark Andreessen, who you also you talk a lot about in the book. Could you give us an overview of those guys and sort of their increasingly kind of anti-democratic perspectives?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have nothing but contempt for democracy. I like Andreessen is an accelerationist, right? He's like the ultimate of the boomer in the boomer-doomer divide. He has said that he thinks that slowing down the development of superintelligent AI is a form of murder. Because once the super intelligent AI shows up, it will be able to save lives. And so we can't slow it down. And this is sort of like the kind of ethos that lives underneath the political actions of someone like Andreessen or Thiel or Yarvin. And Andreessen wrote this really unhinged and telling manifesto, the Techno-Optimist Manifesto, a couple years ago, where he basically comes out and says, we know better than all of you, we the leaders of tech, and we should make all the decisions. And then he quotes the co-author of the Fascist Manifesto and says that, he's great and everybody should read him. And then says, but we're not on the left or the right. But like the fact is that like these tech billionaires, because they lead these enormous companies and because they think they're the smartest people in the world, they have nothing but contempt for any notion of democratic accountability or worrying about the safety or environmental impact or political impact of what they and their companies do. And again, Andreessen is extremely explicit about this in his manifesto. They think that they know best, and that nobody else could possibly understand what the future of technology holds the way that they do, and they should have all of the power and all of the money, and if we trust them with that, then everything will just be fine because they will lead us into this glorious technological future, which is of course not coming. It can't. It doesn't work, and they are too short-sighted to see that. But they claim that everyone else is short-sighted. They reject the notion of domain expertise. Andreessen talks about how academics are unaccountable and playing God with the rest of us isolated in their ivory towers. And like, okay, yeah, Mark, who's unaccountable and isolated from the rest of us and playing God? Sure, yeah, that's university professors. That's not, tech billionaires. Sure,
some
whatever,
projection
Mark.
there, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And then my favorite line in the whole thing is that he says he believes in an absolute rejection of resentment in this manifesto, just dripping with it. But yeah, I mean, they want to be able to act with impunity, and that means that they need to remove everyone else's political power, and so that's what they're trying to do.
Do you ever get the feeling, and this is also something that I talked with Corey about, I was wondering if you had a perspective on it, but Do you ever think that the critics of these people can sometimes amplify them in the way, in the sense that we say Mark Zuckerberg has a mind control ray, or Peter Thiel's an evil demon that wants to, like, it kind of feeds into their own narrative about themselves, right? That they're these great, powerful, omnipotent people.
Yeah, I think so. And they also have like this persecution complex, right? Like they think that they are sort of up against the world. And in a way they are. They've set themselves up against the world, right? They want to take away our political power. But like, I think that, well, this is one of the reasons why I tried to do what I did in my book.
Yeah.
That, I think that we too often criticize them in a way that can reinforce the idea that they know what they're doing, and that what they're doing is awful. I think that they don't know what they're doing, and what they're doing is awful. And I think that puncturing the myth of, the genius billionaire, and showing exactly how little-minded and hollow their ideas about the future are. Like Elon Musk is a little guy. He's just a little guy who's been given way too much money and power.
Right.
His ideas about the future are small and narrow-minded.
Right.
And they do not work because they're small and narrow-minded, and because he has rejected the single most important thing that is any component of any successful plan, which is the input of other people. Right?
Yeah,
No one
surround
does.
yourself with yes men.
Yeah, exactly.
And
No one does anything alone. You need other people critically evaluating your ideas if you want those ideas to be successful. And
yeah,
they're doing the opposite of that. They're insulating themselves from all possible criticism.
yeah. As a last thing,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. Have long been a big fan of science fiction.
Me too.
And I think part of it is that I started reading it later in life. But I'd always sort of taken, like, I one of my favorites is Ursula Le Guin's Dispossessed.
Yeah, me too.
And it's just you're not literally thinking about any of those things physically happening. You're thinking about what they represent.
Right.
And I think a really this kind of entertaining theme. And there's a great quote you have at the beginning of the book about, they read a book called "Don't Invent the Torment Nexus," and their takeaway was we should invent the Torment Nexus.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the sort of the misinterpretations of science fiction and how that feeds into these mindsets?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I want to be clear. I'm a huge fan of science fiction. I grew up reading enormous amounts of science fiction. I have been a science fiction fan my entire life. But science fiction is not a roadmap for the future, right? Science fiction, and Le Guin said this very clearly in a brilliant essay that served as an introduction for The Left Hand of Darkness, possibly her most famous book, that science fiction is not about forecasting the future. Science fiction authors don't know any more than the rest of us about the future, and quite possibly less. And, but if you don't think clearly, and are maybe not that good at thinking critically, or have gotten out of the habit of thinking, which I would argue all of these billionaires have gotten out of the habit of thinking, because thinking is hard and takes effort, and you don't do it unless you have a good reason to, or if you have gotten to enjoy the work. And I don't think that any of these guys have a taste for it, because if they did, I don't think they would have done what they've done. And there's, plenty of evidence of Thiel and Andreessen and the others saying thoughtless things in situations that they really shouldn't. But they look at science fiction and they see what they want to see. They see a roadmap for the future. Thiel has said explicitly that the science fiction of the 50s and 60s serves as a good roadmap for the future. And then he said, its message is develop the oceans, develop the deserts, develop space. Develop is a great euphemism for exploit and destroy. But also develop the deserts. Like that sounds like Thiel read Dune and thought that the message of Dune was, oh, mining spice in the desert is a really cool idea and we should do that. That
Baron
is,
Harkonnen was the good guy.
yeah, exactly. Yes. I mean, he explicitly said, and I said this in the book, but I'm gonna just say it again. Teal explicitly said in an interview with the New York Times that Star Wars is a capitalist story because the entire plot of the first movie is driven by the debt that Han Solo owes to Jabba the Hutt. I seem to remember something about an empire and a rebellion, but maybe that's just me. And George Lucas, by the way, said that he patterned the rebellion on the Viet Cong.
Oh,
So
I didn't know that actually.
yeah. So calling Star Wars the capitalist story is kind of rich.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just it's an endemic problem among these billionaires that they cannot read or understand science fiction. They Jill Lepore has a scathing review of Walter Isaacson's biography of Musk. That this review appeared in the New Yorker a couple years ago, and it's really delightful if you like enjoy reading like a good bad review. And one of the things that she points out is that Musk has profoundly misunderstood The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, one of the greatest pieces of satire and the greatest piece, I think, of science fiction satire ever. That Musk thinks that the message of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is that we need to understand the question of existence, which is the universe. That was a joke, man. That's like saying that you think the message of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is that the answer to life, the universe, and everything really is 42. That was a joke.
It's making fun of people like him
Yes,
explicitly.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, one of the things, like the ultra wealthy, the clueless ultra wealthy, are one of the great targets of that book. And not seeing that is a phenomenal feat of blindness. And that's even, putting aside things like Douglas Adams's, burning contempt for the apartheid regime in South Africa, where Musk grew up. But which again, Lepore talks about this. It's a really great article. But yeah, I mean, like they want to take science fiction as a roadmap. They think that science fiction reveals that tech tree that I was talking about before, that robots and the singularity, which is an idea that ultimately comes from science fiction, the singularity, space colonization, all of these things are part of this very durable idea of what the future looks like. That, the billionaires are not the only ones to believe in this. This is something that's like culturally powerful, but fundamentally it comes from science fiction. It doesn't come from a critical examination of what the future actually holds. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that because I really feel that a lot of these ideas, which obviously come downstream from these billionaires advancing them, but I'm having constant conversations with my friends about AI, about space travel, and they just regular people seem to have bought into a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very culturally powerful, and that's part of the reason why the billionaires have been able to sort of like do what they do, without more people recognizing how silly it is, and how destructive it is, because it seems like it's part of the future. But the fact is that science fiction is not a roadmap for the future, right? It's like watching Star Trek and saying that it's a show about warp drive rather than saying it's a show that's, trying to hold up a mirror to society, right? And Star Trek's I think Star Trek's a great example of this, in part because like I'm a huge Star Trek fan, but also Star Trek has always been extraordinarily hit you over the head explicit about the fact that it's really about holding a mirror up to society, right? It's been doing that since day one, right? The original series, there's that episode where you've got the two aliens where one half of their faces are black and the other half is white, and one of them, it's the left side that's black and the other one, it's the right side that's black, and they've been chasing each other around out of racial animus until their entire civilization burns. That episode aired in 1968, but sure, Star Trek's a show about warp drive.
Right.
Like, like it's it is fiction is a tool that we use for examining ourselves,
Yeah.
right? It's a text, it's a story. We tell stories in order to talk about things that are harder to talk about explicitly. We tell them to entertain ourselves. We do not we like it's not a blueprint, man.
Yeah.
Like I just don't I understand why they believed it was a blueprint when they were kids. But this wealth and power that they've got has caused them to either regress or never grow up in the first place. In
Mm.
that same essay where Teal talked about, freedom and democracy being incompatible, he said, that he's still true to the faith of his teenage years, as if that's a good thing, right?
No character development.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I would be embarrassed to say something like that. And, I believed some good stuff when I was a teenager, and I also believed some bad stuff because, of course, I did, because we grow and change. That's what it is to be alive. There's a way in which these guys who are so afraid of death are already fucking dead.
I'll concede. I think part of it is just that media literacy in this day and age is we're not in the golden age of media literacy.
No, we are not.
Um,
But that's also, and I'm not going to go on and on about this, but like that's
yeah.
also, I think, part of what's going on with like the world that these tech billionaires want to build. Like they have contempt for the humanities, right?
Yeah. They show that all the time.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Like they don't care about history, they don't care about English, they don't care about philosophy. They are very much on the push for like STEM as the only thing that really matters. And like I've got a PhD in physics, and I can tell you right here and now, it is not the only thing that matters. It is not the most important thing, not even close.
As a lifelong humanities guy, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I guess in the hopes of finding something positive, I am interested, and I concede the media literacy point, but I think science fiction also has tremendous power to enact good social progress in a lot
Yeah.
of ways too, right?
Yeah.
And you get a lot of movements inspired by Le Guin's books. You get a lot of people, social reformers, who end up dabbling in sort of utopian science fiction.
Yep.
Would you talk a little bit about a little more about the good side and what we can maybe get out of imagining better realities,
Sure.
while not treating them as a roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, that kind of act of deliberate imagination can be very, very powerful, right? And I mean, yeah, Le Guin has served as inspiration to many people, including me. Star Trek has served as inspiration to many people. You know, and I talk about that in the book. Um, I would be the first one to encourage people to be inspired by good science fiction. Um, I, I, I would not be the person I am today without having been inspired by science fiction. Um, but putting aside all of the media literacy problems that we're just talking about, um, I think that one of the things that is so dangerous about what these tech billionaires are trying to do is they are trying to take this already culturally durable idea of the future and promote it to inevitability. That we will definitely have these godlike AIs. We will definitely go to space. It is the future. And that's a huge power, right? The power to set an inevitable future agenda, even if it's an impossible one, like colonizing Mars. That idea of the future has power, right? Like you were saying, your friends just believe it, right? And so the power to imagine a different future, which is the power that science fiction exemplifies, is an act of both like great hope and revolutionary power. And we need to hang on to that. We can't let this sort of rhetoric of inevitability take away our right to imagine a different and better future for ourselves.
Well, I think your book does a tremendous job. It's sort of, I think, honestly, just showing that these visions are dumb is an incredibly useful thing to do.
Thank you.
And it takes away their staying power. I think if enough people can keep doing that.
Thank you.
So I think we are unfortunately out of time. But
Yep,
Adam
totally.
Becker, thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it, you coming on. The book again is More Everything Forever: AI Overlords, Space Empires, and Silicon Valley's Crusade to Control the Fate of Humanity.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Thanks.
This is a lot of fun.